Telemachus arrives at Sparta and meets with Menelaus, leading to many interesting revelations. Meanwhile, on Ithaca, the suitors finally realize that Telemachus is not at home. Hello and welcome or welcome back. Today we are reading the great books of Western civilization, continuing with the Odyssey. This is the Robert Fagles translation, Book 4. Telemachus and Pisistratus arrive at the halls of Menelaus. The king is in the middle of celebrating the marriages of both of his children, but nevertheless welcomes the travelers inside. Telemachus marvels at the riches of the home, and Menelaus responds that he'd rather have less wealth and better fates for his brother, Agamemnon, now dead, and Odysseus, long lost. Telemachus begins to weep as his father's name is mentioned. This causes Menelaus to recognize him, but he does not say anything until Helen, his wife, points to the similarity between Odysseus and the young man. Menelaus then celebrates the opportunity to host the sons of his dearest friends and comrades. He restates his deep longing to see Odysseus again, bringing himself, Helen, and Telemachus to tears, while Pisistratus cries for his brother Antilochus, killed at Troy. Then Menelaus suggests that they turn their thoughts toward dinner. Helen regales them all with a tale of Odysseus' cunning, of how he infiltrated the city of Troy by disguising himself as a beggar, recognized only by Helen. Menelaus then gives an account of Odysseus' courage as he kept the men inside the Trojan horse quiet, even as Helen threatened to expose them by singing songs to remind them of their homes and their wives that they have there. Telemachus finally interrupts, saying that neither his courage nor his cunning kept his father from death. They go to bed. In the morning, Menelaus asks Telemachus why he has come. Telemachus explains the situation at home and asks for news of his father. Menelaus responds with indignation at the behavior of the suitors, and how Odysseus would make short work of them if only he could get home. Then, he alludes to the fact that he does know what happened to Odysseus, as he was told so by a god. He begins his story. 3 years prior, Menelaus and his men had been marooned near Egypt, since they had failed to appease the gods with sacrifice. The gods were preventing the winds from blowing favorably to bring them home. Menelaus walked on the beach and encountered Eidothea, a goddess, the daughter of Proteus, the old man of the sea. This goddess tells Menelaus that her father can answer any questions he has, including how to get home, if only he can hold him down long enough to ask him. She explains that her father lives nearby, and that he regularly rests in a cave among his seals. That is the place for Menelaus to ambush him. She warns him, though, that he is a shapeshifter, and will use that power as much as he can to avoid being caught. She provides Menelaus with seal skins that he and his men can use as disguises, then shows him the cave. The old man appears, suspecting nothing, and just as he lay down to sleep, Menelaus and his men jumped upon him. He used his abilities to shapeshift into various animals, and even into a torrent of water, but despite this, Menelaus and his men hold on tight. Finally, the old man of the sea returns to normal, and submits to the king's questioning. He tells him that he must return to Egypt to offer sacrifice if he wants to go home, but when Menelaus asks what became of his comrades and if they made it home safely, the old man of the sea tells him, "Little Ajax was struck down by the gods when he boasted before them of having escaped the storms of the sea by his strength alone. Agamemnon was killed at home, and finally, Odysseus is held captive on the island of the nymph Calypso." The old man of the sea also tells him that he is destined to live in the Elysian fields for eternity, the one place where mortals can live in immortal ease. This honor is given to him because he is the son-in-law of Zeus. Menelaus' tale ends. He then offers Telemachus several more weeks of hospitality in his home, but Telemachus refuses, insisting that he leave to return home. Meanwhile, back on Ithaca, Noemon, the man from whom Telemachus had borrowed a ship, goes to the suitors and asks if they know when Telemachus will be home. The suitors' ringleaders, Antinous and Eurymachus, are dumbfounded. They hadn't even realized that the prince had left. They demand that Noemon tell them everything, so he does. He had volunteered his ship for him, and his crew were of the best men in Ithaca, with Mentor in command. However, he says, he thought he had just seen Mentor yesterday, so he postulates that perhaps a god had gone with Telemachus. Antinous and Eurymachus return to the other suitors, and suggest that they prepare their own ship to waylay and ambush Telemachus, killing him before he can make it home. This is the only way to put an end of the trouble that he will cause them. Penelope's servants overhear this scheme and warn her immediately. She too is dumbstruck, for not only is she worried about her son's life, but she also did not know that he had left home. Full of grief and tears, she summons her maidservants and scolds them, for surely they knew of this excursion and did not tell her. Eurycleia admits that she was the one who helped Telemachus to leave unknown, but consoles the queen by urging her to trust in the goodness of Athena, who surely will make sure that this house will live on somehow. Penelope then begins a desperate prayer to Athena, as a number of the suitors prepare for their voyage. That night, Athena appears to Penelope in her sleep, taking on the form of her sister. She assures Penelope that her son will return home. Penelope questions the vision. What about Odysseus? Where is he? But she is given no answer for now. First of all, a few story notes. Odysseus is now confirmed to be alive for Telemachus. This ought to be a huge deal for him, especially seeing how certain he still was of his father's demise. And yet, we don't really get to see his full reaction to it this book or next. But we can expect some sort of reaction at some point. Next, any doubts that any of you might have had about the suitors' intentions or their character has now been put to rest, for they are now openly plotting to murder the prince. Finally, the Old Man of the Sea shapeshifts once Menelaus tries to grapple with him in order to avoid being caught. This is interesting because depending on the source, the Old Man of the Sea is believed to be the father of Thetis, mother of Achilles, and she too had and used this ability when she was trying to avoid being caught and married by Peleus. I love how Menelaus approaches his duty to host Telemachus and Pisistratus. He's in the middle of a double wedding ceremony for his own children, and is already presumably hosting many guests for the occasion. So, his aide asks him, "Strangers have arrived, your majesty. Tell me, should we unhitch their team for them, or send them to someone who is free to host them well?" This is not about having enough resources to host them, but I would guess more so about the convenience, or the timing of their visit, if Menelaus is really able to spare any attention for them right now. Menelaus, however, is offended that this aide would even consider not hosting them, especially considering all the hospitality we enjoyed at the hands of other men before we made it home. Menelaus' thoughts are basically that it doesn't matter if it's convenient or not to do your duty, just do it, in gratitude for what others did for you, if nothing else. The other interesting part of hospitality that we see here involves the parting gifts for guests. We already saw Telemachus attempt to offer Athena a gift when she was visiting him disguised as Menteist, and at the time she refused it because she really had to go quickly, and that wasn't considered rude. In much the same vein, when Menelaus offers Telemachus a gift to bring back with him of several horses, Telemachus tells him that although he is grateful, this is not a suitable gift. Those horses I really cannot take to Ithaca. Better to leave them here to be your glory. No running room for mares in Ithaca. Imagine pulling that one on Christmas. But unlike what we would expect, Menelaus is not offended at all, but instead praises him and offers a much more suitable substitute. It seems that Greek hospitality, or at least Menelaus' spin on it, is not about seeming to do good for your guest or to your host, but making sure that you actually do. The character of Helen in the Odyssey poses an interesting problem for our discussions on free will and how it's thought of at the time of Homer. As I mentioned in the Iliad, whether or not Helen actually went willingly with Paris to Troy is sort of up in the air, since the gods are known to be able to directly influence mortals' wills, or just straight up threaten them, like Aphrodite does, to get them to do what they want. But as Helen tells the story of Odysseus' infiltration of Troy, she gives a sort of explanation for some of her actions. "I'd sworn a binding oath not to reveal him as Odysseus to the Trojans. My heart had changed by now. I yearned to sail back home again. I grieved for the madness that Aphrodite sent me, luring me from my dear land, forsaking my own child, my bridal bed, my husband too." So, before the fall of Troy, supposedly her heart had already changed. She already wanted out. It was a madness, she says, from Aphrodite that made her go to Troy with Paris to begin with. But then, Menelaus tells a story that paints a different picture. In this one, taking place at most 12 hours before the fall of Troy, Helen is trying to expose the Greek soldiers within the Trojan horse by singing to them songs from their homeland about their wives. He attributes this to her being under the influence of a god. "When along you came, Helen, roused no doubt by a dark power bent on giving Troy some glory. When I first read this, I was really confused. Was it all her idea, or was she under a god's influence? What was going on? After all, how could her heart have changed prior to when she was trying to expose the Greeks in the horse? And if she's lying and it hadn't changed, why wouldn't she have revealed Odysseus? Although I've made the case that the Odyssey admits more of the role of free will in human decisions and outcomes than the Iliad did, it's clear that this hasn't been a complete change, especially given Helen. The only way the two stories make sense is if it's exactly as it's told. If she, of her own accord, did not expose Odysseus, but then, under the influence of a god, tried to get the Greeks caught, that is the only way that it can make sense. So the question of whether it was Helen's free will or the influence of a god that had her doing what she did, it's clearly both. While on the one hand, Zeus's universal protection for strangers marks something of a development towards a more universal conception of divine justice, we're clearly not all the way there. The gods definitely still play favorites. Eurycleia comforts Penelope by reminding her that Athena loves this family and that she will not let them die out. It's said to a specific person about a specific family and does not communicate any general well wishes from the gods. Odysseus and his family are, without a doubt, very special to Athena. And it is this specialness and this relationship that both Eurycleia and Nestor refer to in both this chapter and the last. This is not the only example of a god's favor helping to determine a mortal's fate in this book, though. As Menelaus tells the story of finding and questioning the Old Man of the Sea, he also reveals that the gods have selected him to live in the Elysian fields, where a mortal can live forever, at ease. Only a few people are invited to be there, and you do have to be invited. It's one of the few ways a mortal can get out of their normal fate. But why is it granted to Menelaus? Not because of his deeds, and not even his human position as a king, but because he is married to Helen, the daughter of Zeus, and so he is held to be in Zeus's favor. It seems that receiving the highest honors as a mortal in the world of Greek mythology is still very much not about what you know, but about who you know.